All right, we're going to go ahead and dive in and get started. Welcome everyone to today's session. My name is Sean Russell, and I'm the Associate Director of Youth Engagement and Partnerships here at EarthEcho International. And we are so excited to have all of you tuning in today and joining us for a special virtual event focused on the critical role that youth leadership plays in ensuring a sustainable future for our planet. At EarthEcho International, we really believe that young people have the power to change the world. And critical to our programs and our work is our EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council, a group of 17 incredible young leaders from around the world who help guide all aspects of our work and lead the direction of our organization. They help shape our programs and ultimately serve as ambassadors for conservation and youth leadership in their own communities. And today through the session, I'm so excited to have a chance to invite you to connect with three of these amazing young leaders in just a few moments. Now, as we get started today, I want to remind you to interact throughout the session. We want you to share your questions and your comments for our speakers. So just feel free to use the chat box, the Q&A feature, to share those questions throughout the session, and we'll make sure to have time to answer those questions toward the end of our discussion today. Also, feel free to engage with us on social media. You can snap a photo of you tuning into this broadcast or share your thoughts and comments with us at EarthEcho. But with that, I'm so excited to dive in and introduce our panelists today. Again, we're joined by three incredible members of our EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council who are leading amazing work in their own communities, as well as helping us develop programs to inspire young people around the world to take action to protect the planet. So today, we're joined by Haley Charlton Howard, Akila Bandlora, and Arman Alex. And today, we're going to get things kicked off and dive right in. And Haley's going to jump in first and share a bit more about her work, her experiences, and lessons learned in this field. So Haley, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Haley, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about wildlife conservation, my story, and how you can get involved. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background about myself. I come from Melbourne, Australia, that tiny little red dot at the bottom of the map. That photo down in the bottom left is my back at the most southernmost tip of mainland Australia called Wilson's Prom. So where I live is really important in shaping how I became involved with protecting wildlife, and is a really important spot for marine wildlife in general, but I'll come back to that in a minute. I'm a bit of a quiet nerd. I love to travel, and I know way too many random facts about Australian wildlife. I'm currently a third-year student at the University of Melbourne, where I am majoring in ecology and evolutionary biology, with minor focuses of zoology, marine biology, geography, and environmental politics. A lot, I know. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of different roles at the moment, and both have contributed heaps to my wildlife conservation journey. I'm super passionate about science and the environment, but more so wildlife conservation and protection, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about today. So where I live is also really important in terms of wildlife conservation. My home state of Victoria is part of what's known as the Great Southern Reef, a series of interconnected reef systems that span most of Australia's southern coastline. I'm sure you've all heard of the Great Barrier Reef, but I'm not sure many of you will have heard of this one. It's actually much bigger than the Great Barrier Reef, and while it's not as glamorous and warm and colourful, I think it's just as beautiful, special and important, but because of the biodiversity of life that can be found there. It is considered to be what is known as a biodiversity hotspot, not just because of the number of species found there, but because of how many species are what's known as endemic. 30 to 80% of species in a group, such as mammals, fish, or sponges, can be found nowhere else on Earth. As you can see on the map on the bottom right screen, it's a bit small, but it's an area that is considered highly irreplaceable due to the large degree of endemism, meaning that species found in this water are really important to protect. If they disappear on the Great Southern Reef, they're gone for good. These species include the weedy sea dragon in the top left and the Burranan dolphin in the middle, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about later as well, that are only found in Australia's southern borders. Living in such an amazingly biodiverse area is part of what shaped my passion for wildlife conservation. So the main issue that I'm concerned about besides climate change is plastic pollution. Melbourne, my hometown, is built right next to a place called Port Phillip Bay, which is home to a large amount of unique marine life. Unfortunately, as a highly built up city, plastic is often washed directly into the bay, where it breaks apart into microplastic or becomes an ingestion or entanglement risk. From a young age and being lucky enough to be born into a family that was very environmentally conscious, I was very aware of this plastic problem. As such, I joined the Environment Club at my primary school, then joined the Environment Committee at my high school, then became the Environment Captain in my final year, where I encouraged my school to rethink its reliance on single-use plastic and encourage students in my school canteen to go plastic-free in order to protect the beautiful local species found in the bay. I also became involved with Zoos Victoria's Youth Conservation Program, where we would lead events centred around local endangered species and what actions community members could take to protect them. I also started volunteering with an organisation called the Marine Mammal Foundation, where I continue to work to this day, helping to conserve our local marine mammal species through research and educating the public about the threats these species face. This work eventually led me to become involved with EarthEcho International through being featured as a youth in action for the Plastic Seas expedition to my hometown in 2018. I'm lucky enough to currently be in my second term with the Youth Leadership Council and have been able to meet so many incredible people who are doing amazing things for environment conservation around the world. Next slide. So back at home, as I mentioned before, I work with an amazing organisation called the Marine Mammal Foundation, where I work to help protect Victoria's and main marine life. Central to this work is the Burren dolphin, as you can see in the sort of bottom middle. A new species of dolphin found by MMF founding director, Dr. Kate Robb in 2011, which is found only in Southeast Australia, as I mentioned before. The discovery of this brand new species is really exciting, as it's really rare to find a new species of large mammal, especially one which has essentially been right under our noses for so long. However, as the Burren is only found in such a relatively small area, with really small populations only confirmed in 2 locations, being Port Phillip Bay and Gippsland Lake, and are currently under threat, they are listed as endangered under Victoria's Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act. And this is where my wildlife conservation story really begins, as I get to contribute to MMF's work to better understand, protect, and raise awareness of this beautiful species. As you can see, what I do for wildlife conservation is really a whole bunch of different things. For starters, I help collect data about the Burren and other marine mammal species in Port Phillip Bay by helping with on-water research surveys. Here, we collect acoustic recordings and information about marine mammal species distributions. And with dolphins in particular, we take photographs of their fins, which you can see in one of the top left photos, to help identify different individuals and to learn more about these species in order to better manage the processes which are threatening them. I also help with outreach and education events, such as cleanups to help reduce the threat of plastic in Victoria's marine environment, and local festivals to connect with the public, raise awareness of the Burren, and educate people about how they can help protect local marine wildlife. However, one of the absolute best roles, hands down, with my work with MMF is through my role as the Marine Champions Leader, where I help connect, inspire, and provide hands-on experiences to encourage and empower the next generation. I'm lucky enough to work with amazing young people across the state of Victoria. Shout out to anyone at home who might be watching. Thanks for getting up so early on a Saturday morning, where we learn about marine mammals, science, and sustainability, and create our own sustainability initiatives to help reduce human impact to our marine environment. We also go on really cool excursions, and I'd say we have a lot of fun. Through these different experiences, such as helping with research, educating the public, and connecting with young people, I am able to help contribute to the conservation of Victoria's beautiful marine wildlife, including the Burren dolphin. Finally, that's where my journey is with wildlife conservation right now. For anyone watching who might be interested in starting their own wildlife conservation journey in their communities, I have a few tips just to get you started. First one, all experience is good experience, even if you think it might not be relevant. I got to where I am today because I took every opportunity I could, and if you can, I recommend you do the same. You never know where it will lead you. Things like leadership roles, summer internships, volunteering positions, and work experience are really helpful to help you make connections, work out what you are and aren't passionate about, and have some really awesome experiences. If you want experience specifically with wildlife conservation, I'd recommend that you reach out to local nonprofits, research organizations and universities, cleanup groups, or your local Friends of groups as many smaller organizations love taking on new volunteers, especially young people, and some of these can also give you the amazing chance to travel. Secondly, don't be afraid to keep learning. You've always got something new to learn. I need to take a page out of my own book with this one, but know that you're allowed to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. No one expects anyone to be perfect at anything first try. Take feedback and advice on board and instead use it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Thirdly, take time to connect with others. Everyone has a really cool story, and they're more likely to listen to you if you listen to them. Making genuine connections with people, even if you talk to them for only a minute, is really important to wildlife conservation, particularly to raise awareness of environmental issues. Be kind and respectful and brush up on your listening skills. Additionally, making good impressions and connecting with people can help you find amazing new opportunities. For example, if I wasn't working with the Marine Mammal Foundation, I never would have met Jacqueline, EarthEcho's expedition manager, and I never would have gotten involved with EarthEcho. Fourth, follow your passions and back yourself. You always have something to contribute, be it knowledge, life experience, or unique insight, so don't be afraid to share your ideas. In wildlife conservation, everyone is running their own race with a shared goal to protect the environment. So have confidence in yourself and don't compare your journey to others. Finally, if you're passionate about something, don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back and follow your passion. And the last tip I give to you on a much more practical note, and this is something I definitely have to do as well, but if you love field trips and surveys like I do, and you love getting out and about in environments, it helps to learn how to cook a dish for while you're away, even just one, and being vegetarian definitely helps. Wildlife conservation often involves field trips, particularly for research, and most of the time they're overnight or for a few days. Cooking a good meal is the best way to make friends while on a trip and show that you're a reliable contributor to the team. It may also help if you want to go on more trips in the future. And that's it from me. Thanks so much for listening. And now I will pass it on to Akila to talk about amazing work with art and conservation.
Thanks so much, Haley. Akila, before you jump in, I just want to say, Haley, again, thank you so much for sharing that perspective and those great tips. I will say, after listening to a lot of people dish out wildlife conservation advice in my life, I've never heard anyone say learn to cook before. So that's a fantastic one to add. And again, I think the pictures in there, of what wildlife conservation looks like is a great one as well, because again, as you'll hear, as we dive in with Akila and Armand, everyone's story looks a little bit different. I'm excited to give everyone kind of a chance to share those experiences today. So thank you, Haley. Again, if you've got questions for Haley, feel free to add those into the chat box. And Akila, we will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Haley. That was absolutely wonderful. And my name's Akila. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm going to talk a little bit about art and activism. And I wanted to start off with one of my favorite conservation pieces at the moment. It's the gold award winner from the Bow Seats music competition, or the music portion of their art and writing competition. So I'm going to let Sean take care of that and let it play. Yes? Okay, cool.
Most cities, culture legacies, drawn by emissions and false guarantees. Cracking ice, we pay the price. Flooded heritage stories, history. It's scary, the poison sea. Climate stinging like a sea jelly. Coral bleach, we should agree. The ocean is the victim of our tragedies. Look around you, can't you see the world crumbling under me? Oceans rising, waters burning, sea is dying, tables turning, poles are melting, currents changing, no one's helping, quite concerning. What can I do to stop the hurting, stop ignoring and start the learning? If we all start to take a role in the blue planet we call home in. The ocean is dying, the temperature's rising, the sea level's climbing, the melting, the poles, storm escalation, acidification. Was this ever close to our goal? This is for Charleston, New York, Virginia Beach, for Boston and Bombay. This is for Newport, Miami, Honolulu, for Houston and Jersey. This is for ocean currents, for species that weren't able to get away. This is for cities near under the lightning and thunder, the action we need today. But don't worry, there's a way out if you and I can do without carbon footprints and plastic. Ride bikes instead of taxis. So be the change, be the wave, and save the ocean. Be the force, join together, cause the commotion. And forget to you part, resolve the issue. And planet Earth, we won't have to miss you.
Yeah, that's great. Every time I listen to it, I'm like always bopping along. But yeah, if you're interested in doing something like that for conservation, I definitely recommend checking From the Roseseed out. They are amazing, and that's how I got my start in conservation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my story in the next slide. So yeah, I wanted to really start this story off with where I began, and that is with the middle picture. I was a super shy kid growing up. I pulled this from preschool. It was right during Mother's Day, and the teacher wanted to take a picture of me, but I was not having it. I was upset. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be with my mom. And basically what I'm trying to tell you is I would have never imagined that I'm here now speaking very publicly out against climate change and fighting for climate justice. And honestly, if I can do it, so can you. You can use your voice too. Like if that little girl can, like anyone can. And basically, I grew out of that through art. I found myself and the world through it, specifically through poetry, but also through visual art. And I guess I never really was taught climate change in school. I'm from Arizona, and the schools I went to were really conservative, so I never really learned of that. And I grew up in an immigrant family, and their whole motto was, "We're trying to survive with this country. We're not trying to change it." And so I kind of internalized a lot of that. So I never really was politically involved, and even now my family's a little bit against it, but I am working on that, I promise. And so yeah, I guess, and I really never saw a place for myself in the conservation movement. So yeah, I didn't really have a foot in, but then I learned about From the Roseseed, which is this art and writing competition, and they're trying to create awareness for ocean protection issues. So I learned a lot about ocean activism through writing a poem for them, and it ended up getting a gold award. And I now had access at the age of 14 to this wonderful community of artists and writers who also cared about the environment. And that was really foundational for me, and it also gave me a lot of confidence to continue into conservation. So even though I had that online community, I still didn't really have a physical community. So I and a few other environmental activists this past January started talking, and we wanted to plan a strike, a climate strike. So I ended up being one of the lead organizers for that organization, and I ended up being able to perform a poem at Phoenix's first ever climate strike. And I know a lot of people aren't always the biggest supporters of poetry in political movements because they don't see the impact of it, but I can tell you that after I performed that poem, at least like 10 people came up to me and told me that it really helped them process. And I think that's one of the biggest pluses for having art in any kind of movement, is how it helps people process and realize the gravity of a crisis that is so big for any of us to handle individually. So yeah, I now had access to this physical community, and I was doing work in Arizona with the environment. And then I applied for this program called See Youth Rise Up, which I recommend all of you guys to do. It was literally life-changing. And I still remember when Sean called and told me that I was selected, and I asked him like 70 times if he was absolutely sure, because I was so in disbelief. I just started my climate justice advocacy journey, and it felt like I didn't have the years of experience like everyone else. But I think that's just a testament to how open the movement is now, and how it doesn't matter how old you are, you can start fighting as soon as you can, I guess. And after going to See Youth Rise Up, I realized how critical art is to the environmental movement, and how even though a lot of my work has surrounded art and people and really getting to the core of that, it's needed for the environmental conservation movement. So next slide. Yeah, so the next slide touches on a little bit about why we need art in the conservation movement. So for one, art is a universal language. It transcends all the facts and figures that are normally told to us. And although we do need those facts and figures to have concrete policies and propositions for legislators, I think art really helps people understand what's being told to them scientifically. And it also makes the movement accessible. I remember telling my parents about the UN report, and they didn't really understand the gravity of it. They didn't understand what was really happening, and I showed them a couple of the From the Bow Seat winners of this past year, and I think seeing a picture of what's really happening, or hearing a poem, or hearing a song, really just like contextualizes the movement for you and really emphasizes the importance of it. So it helps make the movement accessible, especially for teenagers who don't know specific policy terms, and older people who aren't aware of what's happening right now, and for younger kids. So yeah, I think art is incredibly important for this movement specifically. Okay, so how can you use art to make an impact? So my first one is use art to educate. So before joining the YLC in August, I was a EarthEcho water challenge ambassador. And when I got the package, my parents were really confused because the closest water body to us is about 20 miles out. But I ended up taking my water tasting kit to my summer camp out in Ohio. And we were in this grassland. It's super pretty. There are a lot of water bodies near us. And so for half of the camp, I was really hyping up testing water. I would use it in every poem I wrote. It was awesome. And I got a bunch of friends to come out with me, and we tested water. And there's a couple pictures on there of me and a few friends testing water, and then one of my friend holding up the water that we actually ended up testing and collecting data from. So I think, and after we did all that water testing, we went back and we wrote poems about water near us, like near where we lived, or the lack of the water near us where we live, and how there would be a lack of it in the future. And I think just using storytelling to process that is really powerful, and writing poems about that is super powerful, and it helps these art kids who don't even care about science begin to really understand the policy side of it and the scientific side of it, and why they need to be involved in the climate change or the climate justice movement. And then second, using art to advocate. So I mentioned that I'm part of an organization back here in Arizona, and we held a summit in September, and I led the art and activism workshop. So we broke into 3 little groups, and one of them was for music and chanting. One of them was letters for legislators, which is a great way to combine art and poetry and also policy into one neat little activity. So I completely recommend it. And we ended up having over 500 letters to give to legislators, which is really awesome. And the last one was a big group poem. And this was all me. I was the only one fighting for it, but it ended up being a huge success. People just came and dropped a line, and we ended up showcasing it at our September 20th strike. And it was super cool. And I will definitely be using that kind of art activity in the future. And using art to amplify, like I mentioned before, I used a poem at the group, or at our first strike in Phoenix, and I think that it really helped break the ice for a lot of people. It was our first strike. We didn't really know what we were doing, but hearing movement, I guess, and just movement and art, I guess, and hearing it at the strike really connected with a lot of people. So I think that if you have any policy propositions that you're trying to raise awareness for, using art is an amazing way to do it, especially poetry and visual art, and also collages. That's another great way too. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Akila, for that fantastic perspective and sharing those personal stories and experiences and lessons learned as well. And I think a point that you touch on that really resonates with me and across kind of all the work of our Youth Leadership Council is just that focus on growing the environmental movement, growing the conservation movement, and finding new ways to reach new audiences. And I know for us at EarthEcho, we rely so much on young people, helping to do that, helping to guide our programs of work to make sure we can reach the broadest audience possible and really grow this movement and ensure that everyone's at the table, especially young people. Half the world's population is under the age of 25. So we're really working to build the tools to help young people lead these initiatives and lead the environmental movement at an early age. And with that, I think that segues really nicely into Armand's talk again about the importance of how we communicate these messages and these important topics to a wide variety of audiences. So Armand, take it away.
Howdy, guys. Like Sean said, my name is Armand Alex, and we're going to talk a little bit briefly about communicating STEM and climate change and being able to talk to others about that. And I'm a big believer in the fact that effective communication remains to this day probably the single most powerful set of tools that I know for myself. Uh, I also believe that future STEM leaders and conservation leaders, environmental leaders will need to know exactly how to communicate and collaborate with other people within your own city, locally, or even internationally through something like we're doing right now. Science communication is almost always more than just simply providing information and facts. And as a matter of fact, we really want to evoke a reaction from our audience. It's usually what you're trying to do. And we want to convince them that to act in a certain way, whether it's to take our subject seriously or to support our work directly or even indirectly. And I believe if you structure information into a story that your audience can relate to, they will be much more interested and engaged with what you're presenting. And if you can even if you can even show them how they fit into that story, they will be much more likely to take up your own cause. And understanding how to recognize and manage even your emotions and how to influence emotions of others it's not a secret, it's not a talent, but it's a skill that you can learn to be more successful in being able to relay these messages on climate change and things that you're doing within your community. And communication is a whole lot more than just talking. It's really building a connection with a purpose. And the communication of science takes many forms, from written articles and newspapers or magazines and blogs to standing in front of a non-expert audience to give a lecture or leading an interactive science workshop for children, or even this webinar that we're in right now. But before we dive in, we can get to a little bit, get to know a little bit about me. Now, I currently live in South Texas in the United States. I am a second year undergraduate student at Texas A&M University of Corpus Christi, where I am studying science communications and public relations with a minor in education and political science. And I actually was able to begin that kind of journey through EarthEcho International. I was really able to understand that I have a skill for being able to communicate to people well. I actually started off as an EarthEcho Water Challenge ambassador, and through that program, I was mentored a little bit, and I also kind of got I was told to kind of see what else is out there for me. And so that's actually how I was able to find the Youth Leadership Council. And I am absolutely loving that currently being in there. I'm also a founder and youth outreach coordinator of Project Waves. Project Waves is the acronym stands for Water Assessment of Vital Ecological Systems. I was able to find that through the university. It's a student-led initiative where we go out into our community and actually test water quality. We also act as a helpful lobbyist tool for our South Texas coastal communities as well. And a lot of my passions lay within environmentalism, conservation, and climate and science communication. And I really, really love jellyfish. There is this awesome there's this awesome analogy that I use when speaking at kind of these conferences in regards to communications and talking to the youth, and that a lot of people think of jellyfish as a type of animal that's used for nothing, or they have no other skill than just being able to sting people. And sometimes people look at that and they look at the youth and be like, and they'll say the youth aren't good for anything but just one. And I absolutely think that's the exact opposite. Jellyfish are very powerful creatures. There's a lot to know about these guys. There's so many secrets behind them. They're revolutionizing the medical field. And a single jellyfish can have a single impact, but when you get them together, they make a bigger impact. And I think that's the same thing for our youth today. We can have a lot of power within just one young person, but when you get a lot of them together, you make a movement and you make a power movement. And we can go ahead and look at this next slide. now a lot of people wonder, okay, well, you're talking about communication, but what is communication? And I pulled this definition straight from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and they basically say that it's a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors. And really, communication takes place in a lot of different ways. It could be something as simple as a text message between you and a friend, or an email, a professional email, or any type of email, through social media with posts, or simply face to face as a conversation, as in an audience presentation setting, or even sharing memes. One of my absolute favorite things to do when you're looking at like science memes. Those are my absolute favorite. And we can go ahead and look at this next slide. Um, in regards to climate communication, being able to successfully relay these messages, I think there are a couple of things that you'll have to look at before you actually get started. So usually what you want to do is make sure that you understand the research that you're talking about, or not necessarily the research, or just the information that you're talking about. If it's you're going out to do a water education kind of thing, you want to make sure that you understand the topic of water, and the things that go into affecting it. So when understanding your research, you want to know it on a deeper level, not just the surface. And you have to look at what's beyond just that. You can look at a specific term and know the definition of it, but if you don't know how other things influence that term, and how that term, like for instance, eutrophication, if you don't know how eutrophication affects other things, then you won't be able to relay that message to people on why it's important, and other than it just being a term. Also, what you'll want to make sure to do is to be able to translate those facts. A lot of people don't know like the word eutrophication, which basically things are dying in the water, and they add more nutrients, and they add more things into the water, and basically it blocks the sunlight, and so you can't get oxygen into the water. I could explain that on another level for scientist settings or just to the youth, but you have to be able to take the facts that you read in your research articles, your magazines, all of the stuff that you're reading, and be able to translate that and be simple. And this also always depends on the actual audience that you're talking to as well. And so it has to be different from when you're talking to scientists or when you're talking to the general public. And then also, whenever you're talking to people, making speeches, or doing a group conversation, a conference, you always want to be able to make sure that you include creative stories in there. You want something that's sticky. When I mean sticky, it's a story that you personalize with yourself, and that they're always going to remember. If you're something simple as going to go speak as to a politician, or an email, include a story that affects you. And if you're able, like I said before, if you're able to include that in that story, show them how they fit in that, it's going to stick better, and they're going to be able to take more action. And yeah, like I said, you'll be able to create conversations that show effects. Now, we can go on to the next slide. And before I leave, I'll go ahead and give you my top 10 tips. I take these everywhere with me. I try to make sure to include these in almost every conference that I have, or a presentation that I include about communication. These are my top 10 tips for effective communications. Number one is to know your audience. Before you step into in front of a group of people, before you go to that meeting, before you go to that interview, you always want to make sure that you know who you're speaking to, so that you're able to translate those messages here. Number two is to use your body. I like to speak with my hands a lot. You can kind of see them going up and down here. But if you're able to use your body, you're able to grab people's attention to what you're talking about, and they won't be looking around. But if you use your hands, you'll be able to catch their eyes, and they'll be able to focus on a little bit more about what you're talking about. And also, number three, sorry, is to use your voice. I like to say that there are hills and there are valleys. Learn to be able to slow down your pace when you're talking about something, to really focus on that one point. And you also want to be able to kind of show your high points in your voice and show your low points in your voice. Being able to use your voice as an example are so it's so effective whenever trying to connect with your audience. Number four is tell stories. mentioned this before with sticky stories. This is definitely very, very, very important when you're trying to get somebody to be able to help you out with something. When you're teaching to the younger generation about things, you definitely want to be able to create stories so that they're able to stick with them. If you can remember, I'm sure you've probably heard that, toddlers and elementary, middle schoolers, as they're growing up, their minds are sponges. And if you can create a sticky story that sticks to them, they're going to be able to grow up with that story inside their head. And ultimately, they'll be able to become really great communicators, as well as being able to effectively affect our climate issues, our environment issues, as and such. The next one's going to be connect with your audience. So no matter what setting you're in, you want to make sure that you're connecting with your audience. And you can do that through a sticky story. You can do that through using your voice, using your body, and also knowing your audience, you're able to connect with them. The other thing is, moving on to the next one below, is listening to understand. When you're having a conversation, you don't want to just talk. And when the person's responding to you, you do not want them to just be talking. You want to make sure that you're listening to exactly what they're saying. And while you're listening, do not, try not to think of a response immediately into what they are talking about. All the times when we're having a conversation about something, it could be something like, say you're in a debate. If you're in a debate and you are listening to their counter argument, you're already thinking about how to reply back to that. And what you're missing is you're not really understanding what they're saying. We could be having a conversation, but you wouldn't be completely listening to me. So make sure you're listening to understand, so that when you do respond, it's something that's wholesome and actually can touch up on those points as well. The other thing is respect your audience. This is a really big thing with a lot of younger generations when going to audiences. You want to make sure that you go into that without any bias. Without any bias, I mean, a lot of people have egos and such like that, but you want to make sure you're going into these situations and environments knowing that you're on the same level with everyone. You want to be humble about everything that you're doing, and you want to really, really be able to respect your audience. And that goes both ways, but if you show it first, they're definitely going to be able to show it back to you, and that yields a healthy environment for productive collaboration. And then lastly, think before you speak. Second to last is that think before you speak. So this could even go as just to pre-conversation things, or being able to kind of think about certain topics before you go into an interview, before you go in front of a large audience. Think about these things, or when you're having a conversation, before you reply, take a second to think about what you say before you actually say it, so that you can also make sure and do yourself a favor that you know what they said. Remember when I said to listen to understand, you know what they said, and take that into account, and then be able to formulate a response to that. And that shows really great leadership qualities whenever you think before you speak and not just impulsively respond to something. And then the other thing is to be able to control your emotions. Now, there are many different situations when showing emotion is great, but typically speaking, whenever you're doing presentations, or you're doing, keynote speaking, or talking to conversations, it just really. But controlling is important, because you're able to, say for instance, you're able to take yourself out of a situation and be able to present the facts. Like I said, being able to control your emotions, it really just depends. But for the most part, you don't want to be overly, you could be very passionate about something, but you don't necessarily want to go into every situation that affects you and immediately start crying, for instance. Learn to be able to control your emotions, because some people respond to certain different situations in different ways. And so if you know your audience, you're able to control your emotions just a little bit better. And lastly, if you guys have any questions, we can definitely take that on here in just a little bit, but I'll go ahead and pass it over to Sean. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Armand. And that's a perfect, I think, set of tips and lessons to go into our Q&A here, as we talk about really how do we take the issues that all of you talked about, the issues that we're passionate when it comes to the environment, and really communicate those out to the broadest possible audience and really think about how we, how we adjust our communication style and the way we share these stories with the different groups of people we interact with as well. So with that, it's time for some Q&A. We'll turn off the slides here, make everyone full screen for our discussion, but want to give our audience a chance. If you have questions, feel free to add those to our chat box for the Q&A. We've got a couple so far that have come in to get started with, but feel free to add to these as well. We've got a couple minutes left here. So the first question that's coming in that I want to share with our panel today is just, what is the most important lesson you've learned through your work when it comes to protecting the environment? I know you guys touched on a few of these, but what's the kind of one most important lesson or takeaway you've learned when it comes to environmental conservation? Anyone want to jump in and start on that? When I see that, I realize it's a big question.
I'll go first. I feel like any sort of environmental protection, and I think everyone's kind of briefly touched on it today, is just learning to work with people for a sort of a shared goal, and really connecting with other people and, working together, being able to take their work on board, and for them to work with you to take some of your work on board, and collaboration and sharing to ultimately reach a shared goal is something that I've sort of learned a little bit more about, and I'm hoping to learn more about in the future.
Okay, that's a great point too. And I think there's the two points you touched on there. One is really when we talk about conservation issues, and Armand and Akila really talks about connecting with different audiences. All conservation issues are really people issues, and it can be some way connected to everyone everywhere. And I think that, along with collaboration, is so important to the work we do to amplify the impact of all the programs that you all are talking about and that you're involved in, how we grow that movement. So that's fantastic. Armand, Akila, do you want to add?
Yeah, I can go ahead and add. I think for me, it probably has to be the fact that the youth can have way more power than a lot of people think. I mean, if you think today, there are so many movements out there, whether it be political or environmental or conservation. There are so many movements out there that are by the youth. So I think one of the biggest things that I've come to realize through doing all this great work and meeting amazing people is that the youth have power than a lot of people think. And I think whenever you take that into account and you realize that you have a lot more power within yourself, if you're young, you're able to understand that I can do this. And it's not just I have to be a certain age to be a conservationist. No, you can do it when you're a little kid.
It's a great point, Herman. And I know we always like to recognize the fact that, so often we kind of write off young people as leaders of the future, but I think you all and everyone tuning in and the folks that we get to work with around the world at EarthEcho are such a testament to that. We can't wait till all of you are, out of college or in a job. We need all of you acting and taking on an active role in this field right now today. So that's a great point. Akila, do you want to add to that as well?
Just kind of echoing off of what Haley said, I think when anyone is faced with a big, scary crisis, it's always so reassuring to have people by your side who are fighting with you. So I'm really thankful for the EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council, Youth Rise Up, all the people back home who are fighting so hard to make things better here. That's something that I've really learned.
That's a great point. And we're thankful for you and all of you who are tuning in today, but also I think celebrating that work is so important too. So taking a moment to celebrate that impact and that work is a great point as well. I think we've had for about one more question and one that came to that I want to make sure to ask you all is, you've talked a little bit about your stories and the process you went to get to where you are today. And I'm curious if you can share, what is a challenge that you've had to overcome in this work and how have you done that?
I'll go ahead and take this one first. I think ever since I was little, the way I kind of got involved with the world of science, it started off with marine biology. I've always lived on the coast. And when I was little, my dad would take me out to the beach every morning before school and we'd go collect some seashells. And I remember the way marine biology got triggered for me to start was that one day, or one morning rather, we went out to the beach, we got a huge bucket, put a bunch of seashells in there and took it back home. And after school, we came back into our house and we realized that the bucket was half gone. There was about half of the seashells in there. And so we walk into the kitchen and all these little hermit crabs are in our kitchen, all scattered on the floor. And that probably was the jumping off part for me to get involved with marine biology. But as a little kid, I wasn't always a outgoing person. I think the biggest thing for me was to be able to come out of that little hermit shell that I was in. And from there, that kind of got me into the world of communications. And compared to being that little shy kid before, I think that was one of the biggest obstacles that I've had to come out, is being able to get out of my shell and being able to kind of be like a spotlight for other people.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for sharing that too. That's great perspective. Akila or Haley, do you want to add?
Sure. I can't think of one specific instance, but I've definitely been in spaces where art is being written off, being a young person advocating for the environment is being written off, and just being really decentered in who I am, basically. And I think overcoming that challenge just looks like being persistent, which is something that's really hard, especially when you're constantly being pushed down. But I think it's one of the most valuable things you can ever learn, not even just for conservation, but just in life. So yeah.
Great points as well. Haley, anything to add from your side?
I think a challenge for me when I was younger is that I was kind of like Akila. I really liked science, I really liked conservation, I really liked art in particular, and I liked theatre. And I always kind of felt like I had to choose between them. I remember once when I was picking universities, and I went to one university and I asked, do you do science and fine art double degrees? So I could balance my art and my science passions. And the woman leading the presentation turned around and said, "Oh no, we only offer courses with designated career outcomes." And so that night I thought, maybe I have to pick one or the other. There's nothing, there's no career goal at the end for me. There's no way I can blend those two. And then as I sort of moved through my university courses and different work experiences that I've had, I found that you don't need to pick between your passions. There's always a way to incorporate your experiences and what you love into whatever you do, regardless if it seems like they're polar opposites. Like, how do you cram theatre into, your marine biology passion? But there's always a way, and you never have to pick between your passions if that's something that you're really passionate about.
Awesome. And that's a great point to wrap up on too. I think so much of the work that we do with young people is all about combining all of your passions and bringing those skills all together to create that really powerful movement. So thank you all so much for sharing that. And we are going to get ready to wind down here. I'm going to pull up our slides just for one more moment here as we wrap things up. And again, want to thank everyone who's tuned into the sessions today for being part of this virtual event. And really want to encourage you to join all of our programs at EarthEcho International and visit earthecho.org to dive in to learn a little bit more how you can get involved. Be sure to check out our EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council if you're a young person ages 15 to 22 and want to join this team alongside Armand, Haley, and Akila. Also, our EarthEcho Water Challenge program, EarthEcho Expeditions, EarthEcho STEM Explore, and lastly, we're excited to announce a brand new program from EarthEcho, the EarthEcho Challenge. And I'm going to play just a quick video to give you a little taste of this exciting new program.
I'm Philippe Cousteau, and I am so excited to announce the latest program from EarthEcho International. It's called the EarthEcho Challenge, and it's a new way for students to protect biodiversity and get the funding to do it. The EarthEcho Challenge empowers teams of middle school students to explore their community, identify threats to local species, and then submit an idea for a project that will help to restore a healthy ecosystem. 10 finalist teams will join EarthEcho International in Washington, D.C. to present their ideas, and the top 3 teams will be awarded grants to turn their project into a reality. Go to ourechochallenge.org and join our STEM competition by submitting your plan to change the world.
And those applications are open up now through March 22nd. So be sure to check that out and be part of this exciting new opportunity to tackle biodiversity challenges in your own backyard. And with that, I want to encourage you all to stay connected to our team at EarthEcho. Make sure you check us out on social media and on our website at earthecho.org. Reach out to us if you have other questions for our team or our panelists. And I want to say a huge thank you to Armand, Haley, and Akila for being part of this today and sharing their perspective, to all of you for tuning in, and to the amazing team at the National Biodiversity Teach-In, the students and teachers who make this possible. We're so grateful to be part of this fantastic event and really appreciate all the great work you do. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you all next time.